I'm going to help you smash 5 common mistakes with modals so you can get your English to an advanced C1 English, C2 English level. So mistake number 1 is setting the right level of politeness. So in English, one of the most common ways to make sure you speak with the right level of politeness is to use modal verbs in a certain way. I'm going to walk you through it now. So let's imagine you're in a restaurant, you're coming to the end of the meal and you want the piece of paper that tells you how much to pay. In the UK, we call this the bill. In America, sometimes this is called the check. Maybe you say, "Will you get me the bill?" Is this okay? Well, this can seem a little bit demanding, and I'll show you why in a moment. It's more polite to say, "Would you get me the bill?" And it's even more polite still to say, "I would like the bill, please." Now, there are some principles that you can learn that easily explain why this is more polite. So in English, we make our requests more polite by using a past form instead of a present form. So for instance, could is a past form of can. Would is a past form of will. And when we use the past form, we're being more polite. We can also make our request more polite by being more hypothetical, and would is a word that we use for hypothetical reasons. And one further way of being more polite is by using sentence form rather than question form. For example, you could say, "I would like," rather than "would you?" And all these 3 things make your requests more polite. And there's a principle behind this which you can learn and apply in any situation, and that is the principle of distancing. Distancing means by putting space between you and the person hearing. Let's think about it in the physical first. If someone's further away from you, it's less immediate or threatening or demanding than if someone is close to you asking. And we could do the same thing with our language. If there's more distance from time, so past is more distant in time than the present tense, or more distance from reality, so would, hypothetical, has more distance from reality than if we didn't use it, or more distance from the question itself, so using a sentence puts distance from the fact you're asking a question. All of these 3 things create distance in our language between what we're saying and the person hearing. And this makes our requests less demanding, less threatening, less immediate, and therefore they come across as more polite. And you can use these principles in any situation in English to make sure you are polite. Now, my second mistake has a language emergency attached to it. Mistake number 2 is would is not the past simple for will. Now, why do I call this a language emergency? Because there's so much information that just simply says that would is the past of will. Maybe your teacher's told you, your textbook says it, would is the past of will. That is far too simple, and in this section of the video I'm going to put it right, and if you have any friends who are not sure or not doing what I say in this video, tell them, share the video with them. Let the whole world know what I'm about to tell you about the relationship between would and will, because it is crucial and it's also simple. Because the problem I have here with saying that would is the past of will is this. Now, this is a correct sentence. I will go to school tomorrow. We all agree it's in the future. So can I therefore say, if would is the past of will, can I therefore say, I would go to school yesterday because it's the past of will? No, you can't do that. You cannot simply make would the past simple. Now, there are 2 clear ways in which would is the past of will, but they are in these two ways, so watch carefully. So first of all, we already understand that will is the future from now. So let's imagine these two sentences together. I am home at the moment. I will go to school tomorrow. So will tells us the future from this point, from the present situation. So will is the future from now, from the present situation. So how is would the past here? Well, would is the future from a point in the past. I was at home last Sunday, let's imagine. I would go to school the next day. So what's happening here? Well, both will and would here are describing the future. But it's the future from a particular point. Will from now, would from a point in the past. So I will go to school tomorrow is the future from now. I would go to school the next day is the future from last Sunday. So we describe it. So in this example with would, we're thinking of a story, it's set in the past, and we describe what's going to happen in the future from that point. And this is the most common way that would is the past of will. In fact, if you just take a sentence with will and try and turn it into the past with would, this is the meaning you create. You create this meaning. You create a sentence that is the future from a point in the past, not the past simple. It's different. There's also a second common way, and this is that would replaces will in reported speech. So look at the words in underneath reported speech, which is underlined. I will go to school tomorrow. If I report what I said, then I might do this. I said I would go to school tomorrow. Remember the rules for reported speech? With reported speech, we shift our tense backwards one. And for will, we do this by using would. So for reported speech, we also use would as the past of will. But not in other situations. Would can also be used for other meanings too, which makes it even more important to keep that distinction from will different, because here would does not have a connection to will at all. So here, would has various other uses such as hypothetical situations, past habits, and as we've seen with polite requests, but never, never, never the past simple. Okay, mistake number 3 is making deductions. What do I mean by deductions then? So if we go through this example, I can explain more clearly what I mean by a deduction. Have you a friend who's got a pet? Maybe you've got a friend who has a rabbit. And one day they call you and they say, Rupert, I have a problem. My friend's rabbit has escaped. Now, how did it happen? And this is where you start thinking, how did it happen? And that's logical deduction. When you start thinking how something happened, or you're trying to work out the possibilities, that is what I mean by deduction. And we can use modals to show logical deduction. Let's start thinking then. Well, what could have happened? Well, looking at a past deduction, it might have escaped through the door. Maybe someone opened the door and they forgot to close it. So here we have the modal, might. Then we have, which is the way that we put something into the past after a modal. And then we have the verb in the past participle form. So might can be used for logical deduction. We could also use may for logical deduction. It may have escaped through the door. And we can also use could here. It could have escaped through the door. But could is the word where sometimes we go wrong. And this is one of the mistakes I want to help you correct in a moment. Let's go through the whole system of how logical deduction works in English. So we have two types here. we have past possibility and past certainty. I'll come to the present tenses in a moment. For past possibility, we could use may, might, or could, followed by have, followed by the verb in the past participle. For past certainty, we'd use must. Here are the examples. It might have escaped through the door. Well, this means it was possible. It could have escaped through the door. Yes, this was possible, past possibility. But it must have escaped through the door. This is definite. This is past certainty. The main problems here come when we try to flip to the negative side, because we kind of think, well, if we just make may, might, or could negative, then we'll get past possibility in a negative sense. And if we make must negative, we'll get past certainty. But it does not work like that. Instead, it works like this. Past possibility for negatives use may not or have not with have and the verb. But for past certainty, which is negative, we don't use must. We use can't or couldn't followed by have or the verb. For example, it may not have escaped through the door means this was possible but in a negative sense. But it couldn't have escaped through the door means this was definitely not possible. So I want you to watch out for this. How are you using could for logical deductions? Remember that the meaning of could changes from possibility to certainty if you make it negative. Now, present logical deduction works in the same way, except you use be instead of have. So instead of it could have escaped through the door, you might say it could be escaping through the door. So the ing form here shows us this is a possibility now. This might be happening at this moment. And for future logical deduction, we simply use the modal followed by the verb itself in the infinitive, but we don't do this with must. So it could escape through the door. Well, in one way, it's just a general possibility. We're saying what could be true, but we're also predicting a possibility for the future. If we say it could escape through the door, we're saying, well, this could happen now, but it could happen later. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen next year. We're not saying about the past here. So this is how we would make the future with logical deduction. Okay, on to mistake 4, and this is to do with past ability. And this is such an easy mistake to make, but we're going to get it right today. So past ability, let's look at this man here. What's he doing? He is doing something which in English we call juggling. Do you know anyone like that? Very impressive. He's got 6 different balls he's juggling here. So I could say this. My friend can juggle. So I use the word can for an ability that someone has now. This is an ability he has now. What about if I'm talking about last year? Well, could can be the past of can in this case. My friend could juggle. And this means this is an ability he had in the past. It seems simple, doesn't it? But let's throw in something different. So this lady here is finishing a race and it looks like she won the race. But can I say this? My friend could win the race. It's ability, isn't it? But the difference here is it happened only once. And if we're talking about ability that happened once, we cannot use could. Instead, we have to use was able to. My friend was able to win the race. In other words, she was able to win on one occasion. And now our final mistake, and this is with mustn't or don't have to. Here's perhaps someone's work plan for the week. Which days of the week do they work on? It looks like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They don't work on Saturday or Sunday. So if we're speaking about Wednesdays, I must go to work on Wednesdays because you must go to work. It's necessary. When you have a job, most jobs that is, not all of them, but most jobs, it is necessary to go on the days where you're supposed to work. So I must go to work on Wednesdays. This is necessary. Now I can also use have to. I have to go to work on Thursdays. This is also necessary. What about Fridays? Well, let's look at this from the other point of view. I must go to work, so there are some things that I mustn't do. For example, I mustn't stay in bed on Friday because I should be at work. So in other words, it is necessary, but it's necessary not to do this. Is that the same way that we're going to use have to? Well, no. Have to in the negative is different. I don't have to work on Saturday. This is different. It means it is not necessary to do this. I can stay in bed if I want. Let's explain this a bit further. So with mustn't, there is a rule, but it's to not do something. You mustn't walk on the grass. You mustn't pick your teeth when you're eating. There's a rule, but it's not to do something. But don't have to is different. Don't have to means there is no rule. It is not necessary. You have freedom to choose whatever you want. So those are 5 mistakes that after this video, I trust you're going to be much more confident about. You're not going to make those mistakes again. And if you want to reduce your mistakes even further, try my English grammar course, which is especially designed if you want to be at a C1 or C2 English level. On this course, I'm taking the hardest grammatical topics that there are. It's really going to help you if you want to get to the highest level of English possible. There's a link in the description to Udemy. It's not expensive. Click on the link, join the course. It's got lots more on modals and lots more on a whole range of grammatical topics. Try the course to get more from me.